Today, we're going to talk about something that's kind of invisible but hugely important: the rules that govern our kids' lives online. Every time they play a game or use an app for school or just watch a video, they're leaving behind this trail of data. So, our mission today is to break down the global laws that are trying to protect that digital playground.
I mean, seriously, think about it for a second. A kid's digital footprint can start before they can even read. From those first educational apps to all the online games, they're creating this massive data trail almost from birth. They're navigating a world of data collection way, way before they have any concept of what privacy even means.
So, that leads to a really crucial question, right? If a child can't give what we call informed consent, then whose job is it to protect them? Who's stepping in to guard against all that tracking, the profiling, and, the much scarier stuff like exploitation?
All right, so here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the digital footprint itself. Then we'll look at the world of rules that have popped up. We'll compare some of the big laws out there, tackle the challenge of enforcement, talk about why all this matters, and wrap up with what it takes to build a safer digital childhood.
Okay, let's kick things off with the why. What is it about a child's data that's so different? Why does their digital footprint need this extra layer of protection? Well, it really boils down to this. Kids just can't comprehend the long-term consequences of their data being collected. It's just not something their brains are wired for yet. And that vulnerability, it makes them, unfortunately, perfect targets for really sophisticated online profiling, for behavioral ads that are designed to shape what they want, and for some even more serious risks out there. So the good news is governments around the world have started to recognize this vulnerability, and they're stepping in. Let's take a look at how the legal world is trying, and I mean trying, to catch up with technology. There's this growing consensus across the globe that, yes, kids absolutely deserve special protection online. But here's the thing. Agreeing on the goal, that's the easy part. As you're about to see, the actual approaches countries are taking are really different, each with its own unique definitions, its own boundaries, and its own set of rules. And that brings us right to the heart of what we're talking about today. We're going to put four of the biggest legal frameworks side by side. We're talking the European Union, the United States, India, and China. Okay, first up is Europe's GDPR. You've almost definitely heard of this one. It's that landmark regulation that pretty much set a new global standard for data protection. And yeah, it has some very specific things to say when it comes to kids. So under GDPR, the default age where you can give your own consent for your data is 16. Now, individual countries can lower that to 13 if they want, but for anyone younger than that, services have to get verified parental consent. And here's the part I love. The law actually demands that privacy notices be written in a way that kids can understand them, not just a team of lawyers. All right, now let's hop across the Atlantic to the US and talk about COPPA. This law was a real trailblazer, honestly. It was setting the stage for protecting kids' data long before this became a huge global conversation. So, COPPA is laser-focused on one group: children under the age of 13. It says that websites have to get parental consent before they collect any personal information. And that's not just a name or email. We're talking everything, right down to an IP address. Plus, it gives parents the power to go in, review their kids' data, and even delete it whenever they want. Okay, now let's jump over to India, where their new Digital Personal Data Protection Act, or DPDPA, has taken what you could call a remarkably strict stance. So get this. India's law defines a child as anyone under 18. That protects a much wider age group than most other places. The law also flat out prohibits any behavioral tracking or targeted ads for them. Now, there is some talk about maybe lowering that age, but for right now, it's one of the most protective frameworks on the planet. And finally, our fourth stop is China,
With its Personal Information Protection Law, or PIPL. It's a newer law, but it's incredibly robust and it has its own specific rules for kids. PIPL protects children under 14 and, you guessed it, requires parental consent. But what's really interesting here is its focus on two big ideas: purpose limitation and data minimization. So, what does that mean? In plain English, it means companies have to have a really good reason to collect a kid's data, they can only take what's absolutely necessary for that reason, and they're not allowed to just hang on to it forever.
Wow. Okay, when you see them all laid out like this, the differences are pretty stark, aren't they? The very definition of who counts as a child for data privacy goes from 13 in the US all the way up to 18 in India. Imagine you're a global platform. Trying to navigate this patchwork of rules is a huge, huge challenge.
So, we've got all these laws on the books, which is great. But that leads us to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? How well do they actually work in the real world? Well, the truth is, putting these laws into practice is incredibly difficult. For one, kids can just lie about their age online, right? It makes age verification a constant cat and mouse game. Then you've got these global companies trying to deal with this crazy maze of different, sometimes conflicting rules. And on top of all that, there's this ethical tightrope to walk. When does a teenager's own right to privacy start to become more important than a parent's right to supervise them? It's tricky. Okay, let's zoom out for a second, because these laws aren't just, abstract legal documents. They have very real, tangible consequences, both for businesses and for the kind of digital world we're all building together. And this brings us to a really critical concept called privacy by design. It's pretty simple, actually. It just means that if you're a company making products for kids, whether it's an educational tool or a game, privacy can't be an afterthought. You can't just bolt it on at the end. It has to be baked in from the very beginning, right into the core of the product. It's not just a legal thing, it's how you build trust. And believe me, the stakes for getting this wrong are massive. Under GDPR, for instance, the penalty isn't just some small fine. It can be up to 4% of a company's global annual turnover. For the big tech giants, we're talking about fines that can easily run into the billions of dollars. So as we start to pull all this together, it's pretty clear this whole issue is about so much more than just ticking legal boxes. It's really about the fundamental principles we want to build our digital world on. You see, protecting children's data isn't just a legal obligation, it's a moral one. Kids are still figuring out who they are, and the data that's collected about them today could shape their opportunities and their vulnerabilities in the future in ways we can't even begin to predict. That's a profound responsibility. And so, ultimately, we're left with this question. Laws are always going to be a step or two behind the technology. The real change, the meaningful shift, is going to happen when these principles of protection are built right into the code, into the design, and into the business models of the platforms our kids use every day. So the question for all of us is, are we actually building a digital world that truly protects childhood? That's the question we all need to keep asking.